You're listening to the Pole Position Podcast from Let's Talk Sport.
Lights out, away we go!
YEE HAA! It's the US Grand Prix this weekend, and the Pole Position Podcast builds up to the 17th race of the season. Joining me on this show is Dan Middleton and Jack Price. So get your cowboy hats on and get ready for the Pole Position Podcast.
The world champion, well done, enjoy it! Woo-hoo!
That's the greatest moment of my life. Thank you guys so much.
So next up on the Formula 1 2017 calendar is the US Grand Prix. And that is, of course, in Austin, in America, the Circuit of the Americas, which, of course, started in 2012, which was that great rivalry between Hamilton and Vettel in that race, which was Lewis Hamilton's last McLaren win before his move to Mercedes. Let's look through the facts about it then. So the most wins is Michael Schumacher. Of course, this is the overall US Grand Prix, as, of course, we've had it in Indianapolis and so on. Schumacher with 5. Lewis Hamilton with 5, of course. Lewis Hamilton starting to chase down all Schumacher records at this moment in time. The most team wins is Ferrari with 9. There's going to be 56 laps on Sunday. The circuit length is 3.4 miles, and then the race length is just over 191 miles. Last year, the pole position was by Lewis Hamilton, and he won it very well on the podium. Coming first last year with his rival Nico Rosberg second. This was when Hamilton was losing the World Championship, and those 25 points were very vital. And Daniel Ricciardo completed the podium with 3rd place. And Jack, I feel Hamilton is going to be the favourite to win this weekend because of the fact that he's won on this circuit 4 out of the 5 times.
Yeah, this is certainly a track that he favours. He enjoys the Circuit of Americas probably more than most drivers. I think Daniel Ricciardo maybe is the other driver on the grid that enjoys the track as well. But I think as much as Hamilton's going to enjoy it, I think this is definitely one for Ferrari to sort of pick up again, because they need this. They've had 3 or 4 terrible races now, let's be fair, and Sebastian Vettel, he could lose it this weekend if all the things go against him. So this is definitely one where the team and the drivers need to pick themselves up. But Lewis Hamilton in America, he loves the country and he loves the circuit, so who knows, if Mercedes perform as well, he could win the World Championship this weekend.
Dan, of course, the World Championship may be decided this weekend, but at least for Mercedes, it should be well and truly over.
You'd like to think so, wouldn't you? I think if you're in Lewis Hamilton's shoes, you want to get it sewn up, done and dusted this weekend. I think the importance of having a good qualifying has never been more important for Lewis Hamilton, and even for Bottas to try and get himself in there, qualifying 2nd, 3rd, whatever, just to get in between Vettel, and gives Mercedes a real chance of a 1-2. And if Bottas can help his teammate to go on to win it, then even better for the whole of Mercedes. Really, it's going to be a tough ask for Vettel. He needs to bounce back, as Jack said, but you'll see with the predictions later, but I can't see it happening.
Well, of course, with the press conferences on the Thursday, as usual in the F1 world, Sebastian Vettel was able to avoid the press, but Lewis Hamilton thought he just needs to win this weekend, but he's not thinking about the World Championship. This is what he had to say.
Nothing's changed for me, man. Everything's exactly the same as it was going into the last race, into the second half of the season. It's exactly the same mentally for me. So maybe it's changed from your perspective, but for me it hasn't. Honestly, I think the talk of the championship win this weekend, I think, is silly, really. I mean, you can't expect them to have a difficult weekend again. They're going to be quick. They've got an opportunity to win the championship. As long as it's done in the next 4 races, that's my focus. I honestly couldn't care less if it was here or the last race. As long as it's done, winning here is the most important thing for me, particularly in the heat of, in the midst of all that's going on in the country. I think that is a priority for me.
So it could be all and truly over with only 3 races to go after America, which is not what we really want as F1 fans. We want it to stretch as far as it can, even though it probably won't reach to the final race in Abu Dhabi. But, of course, let's talk about the latest of F1. Let's talk about another driver now, another world champion, and that is Fernando Alonso. Yes, he has announced in America that he will be staying at McLaren for 2018, and it is believed that he has the option of extending, and apparently, according to Sky Sports, he is going to make sure he actually retires from F1 while he's at McLaren. So this is what he had to say moments after he made the announcement.
The feelings are great. Obviously, it's a good day for me, announcing, next year I will be back here with McLaren, and obviously happy and proud to continue this relationship. Has been 3 difficult seasons for us. We are not as competitive as we wanted, and now I think it's time to change this situation, and hopefully next year to be back on the positions that McLaren belongs, and hopefully give us something to our fans that they kept supporting us in the last 3 years, and that will be the main theme for next year. And as I said, happy to arrive to this agreement at the end.
Jack, it's quite nice to see Alonso share his commitment with McLaren until he retires, but yet again, I guess at his age of 36, he really hasn't got many years left in the sport.
No, and like we've been saying for a couple of weeks, he hasn't exactly got the most, quite a few choices to choose from. There wasn't really a lot. So I think McLaren was definitely the best option. I think obviously with Renault now being the engine supplier for next year, that's obviously another boost because he's won 2 World Championships with Renault, so that was obviously going to be a major factor. But I also think he does respect the team, and he does. I think he loves McLaren, just like back in the old day when his dad bought him a little racing car when he was a kid in the Senna colours, in a McLaren car. So I think he does love the team, but it probably has been a big strain these last few years with Honda in the back of that car because it just has been terrible. But if you can get Fernando Alonso in a good car at the top of the grid, anything can happen, and I think that's what fans want to see. They want to see next year Hamilton, Vettel, Alonso up there. If Bottas performs a bit better than he has, with Raikkonen still in contention, that's what we want. We want all these big drivers at the front fighting for points.
Dan, of course, we kind of expected this was going to happen, didn't we? That he was going to stay at McLaren, but could next year be a good year? Could he finally get them their first win since the Brazilian Grand Prix in 2012, which was Jenson Button who won that race? Do you think Alonso could get that team back to winning ways with a Renault engine?
I think just getting a podium, let alone winning next season, will wipe out all of this season for Fernando Alonso. I think it'll put a lot of things to bed for him. I think he needs to get back up there. He's, as we all know, it goes without saying, he's a quality driver, and like Jack said, in the right car, Fernando Alonso can get going. He really can. Will they be as quick as Mercedes, etc. next year? I don't think so. I think Mercedes will only carry on from where they left off this season and last. Ferrari, of course, will always be up there. Red Bull again. So it's still going to be sort of a mid-table thing for McLaren. Maybe even still towards where they are now, but with that new Renault engine, I think Fernando Alonso could start making things happen, and even to an extent Stoffel Van Dorn as well. I think maybe he can start pushing maybe into top 10s and try and get a few points on the board for McLaren, because let's be realistic, this year has been a complete failure in all aspects of the team, so they need to get back to being better next season, and with that new engine it's all possible now.
Jack, I feel next year I would love if McLaren were to be a lot better than their Honda days, which they couldn't get any worse, let's be honest. I really would love to just at least see another team rivaling for the Drivers' Championship, because next year we could potentially have 4, which is Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull and McLaren.
Yeah, I mean that's but like I said, that's what you want. You want that. You want all the top teams with all the top drivers fighting for next year. We've got we've got the new France Grand Prix next year as well, which will be interesting to see with some of the drivers on that. But yeah, we want all the best teams, and I think McLaren with that Renault engine, they could start fighting, because Renault as a team itself have been pushing and progressing this year. You've seen what Hulkenberg could do. He's been pushing up there in the top 5s, top 6s. So if McLaren can get that engine, we all know that McLaren have probably got a decent chassis in that car. It's literally just been the engine at the back. So if they can get that good Renault engine and their good chassis together, they've got a good combination to make a great car for next year, and that's what we want. We want them fighting up the top, and I think there's a lot of McLaren fans for the last 4 or 5 years that have been a little bit depressed, but hopefully next year that can sort of change.
What are we saying about Force India and Haas F1 then? So if McLaren were to really bounce back next season, I'll get your opinions as well. Of course, the listeners can put theirs in the comments as well. But with regards to Force India and Haas, they've had relatively good seasons, to be honest. Force India, most surprising of all, have been very good. I'm just looking at the Japanese Grand Prix, of course, Ocon and Perez 6th and 7th for Force India, Magnussen and Grosjean 8th and 9th for Haas F1. And where does that leave them then? Jack, I'll ask you, where does that leave them if McLaren were to bounce back next year?
I think out of all them teams, Haas is probably the one that's the weakest. I think just because they're the one of the newer teams in the sport, they get all their supplies from Ferrari, which isn't a bad thing, but sometimes it's very difficult to start up with a new team and get all your supplies from somewhere else. So I think that they're always going to be struggling. I mean, Grosjean this year has been struggling a lot with brakes. His brakes seems to be in every single track. They're really struggling with that. So I'd say they're probably bottom at the list. If all 4 teams are really fighting, I think Haas is probably at the bottom of that. You've got Force India, which I know Jamie's going to talk about with Sergio Perez in that team, but I think that they're never going to progress any higher than where they are now, simply because they don't have as big a budget as maybe McLaren does or Renault, with Renault being a works team. And I think if Renault and McLaren really do push on next year, I think Renault could be higher than McLaren. I think Renault do look promising, so if I looked at in structure, I'd probably go Renault, Force India, McLaren and Haas.
It's like it's a dream for Alonso all of a sudden, because it's little things like 2008 I forget as well, where he won the Singapore Grand Prix, and he won a race after that one. He won 2 in a row for Renault. Obviously, we won't talk about the gate crash. That was a bit. We won't talk about that, even though Alonso still won the race and took the points out of that one. But it just shows the potential Renault still has, even in years when they haven't been challenging for the World Championship. And as Jack mentioned, he is driving a McLaren as well, so he's got the dream engine that brings him back very good memories, and he's with the McLaren car that he has always dreamed of driving for the team when he was a kid. So it looks good for Alonso in 2018. Let's move on, though, because there is, of course, a new face on the F1 circuit this weekend. It may only be for one, but you never know. If he impresses, we never know what could happen. Daniel Kvyat hasn't exactly got a bright future for Toro Rosso, or just in F1 in general, like Jolyon Palmer. He may have to go to a cafe go to a bar and drink with him, because I'm sure Palmer's getting very well drunk right now, wondering what on earth he's going to do with himself. But this is Brendon Hartley. Now, he's from New Zealand. He's definitely a very happy chap at the moment. You can't blame him. He was a Red Bull reserve driver in 2009 to 2010. He just didn't quite make it to the Red Bull team. But when you got Vettel and Mark Webber in those years, it's very difficult. So he can't have been ashamed about that. But he has now been given the opportunity, as of course Pierre Gasly is driving in the last Grand Prix of Super Formula, in which he is a title contender. So he didn't want to miss out on that. And he will team up with Daniel Kvyat. Here is Brendon Hartley's first ever appearance at a press conference.
When it was announced Porsche would stop endurance racing in the LMP1 for next year, I called Helmut Marko. I said, look, I'm a different driver than 10 years ago, and I've learnt a lot, and if there's ever an opportunity, I'm ready. He didn't say much. He just said he got the message, and 3 months later he made the call, and this happened very quickly. I didn't know about it much sooner than the press did. So it's been quite a whirlwind of a couple of weeks. I'm a lot stronger than I was back then, basically. I wasn't ready at 18 years old. I like to think I'm ready now. I'm not very prepared for this weekend. I haven't driven a car and haven't driven a single-seater since 2012. But I like to think the Porsche LMP1 has hopefully prepared me well.
Dan, let's start with you then. So Brendon Hartley, I mean, obviously this is a great moment for him and his career just to be able to drive an F1 car at the age of 27. But surely he'll have to use this weekend as a way to try and actually get a contract for next year, because it's not like Daniel Kvyat is a certainty for 2018.
No, and I think it'd be interesting to see how he fares. I mean, just looking at him now, I think I also rate his hairstyle first of all. I think he's got the wacky sort of New Zealand look, and I enjoy that. But of course, we looked at his Twitter earlier, and he obviously posted a photo saying that it's all getting real now, that this is actually happening for him. He's doing media press conferences, he's doing the seat fittings, he's doing everything that goes into the practice, and I think it's going to be great for him, a great experience for him. And I tell you what, if he smashes it, I think Kvyat's going to be looking over his shoulder just a little bit, with potential for Brendon Hartley to come into Formula One. But we'll see how that fares. I think it's all about getting the car ready, and Brendon Hartley to one side a little bit, but we'll see how it pans out this weekend.
Of course, there was a picture Brendon Hartley put, I think it was on Instagram, one of the social media pages, where of course when each driver has their own garage, they have their own name above with a picture of their helmet as well, and he was pointing up on the sign saying something, as you said, Dan, I think it was the words of it's all happening, and it's a picture of him pointing at his name on the sign. That must have certainly made him a very proud New Zealander. But Jack, there's a problem. I read a preview article before where apparently Brendon Hartley is going to have to start at the back. I'd imagine it might be a grid penalty. I haven't really read into it, but not exactly the start you want in your first F1 race.
Well, is that not classic FIA standard? They just start to put everybody at the back. I don't know how many times we've talked about it. It's becoming a bit of a joke now. I think the fact that if it was Carlos Sainz's car or Pierre Gasly's or whoever's car he's taking this weekend, being that it's a new driver, he shouldn't have to deal with the penalties that the last one had. I just think it's absurd, really. I think if it's like 20 places or something, it just makes no sense. It really gets on my nerves when Fernando Alonso has a 40-place grid penalty. There's not even 40 cars on the track. What's the point? It makes no sense. It's just stupid. But if that is true, I sort of feel sorry for him. But if he can get up the grid and overtake a few cars, he's got a chance of overtaking the Saubers. I mean, they'll either be crashed into a wall or be going at 4 miles an hour. So I think he's got a good chance of overtaking them. But I just think it's absurd. But the one thing I would like to point out in this is that how many drivers have been have come in this season or been replaced. The driving standings must look crazy with all these drivers coming in. I mean, it was a bit confusing when Button was in for one race this season, so they've got Jenson Button on the grid, but now they've probably got loads of them. Toro Rosso have had 4 or 5 drivers this season.
I'm reading here that Hartley's actually going to be supposedly replacing Gasly, which will be interesting.
Well, I mean, what is that? It's so confusing, isn't it? Because Pierre Gasly, I thought he did quite well in Japan, but then I'm really confused by it because they can't seem to make their mind up. Does this mean that they've got so many drivers to choose from in their program that it doesn't really matter if Gasly picks another commitment?
For me, it means that Toro Rosso don't have a strategy going forward. They're chancing it. If you're going to put him in there, you've surely got an idea of the team that you want for next year, and how to build that. And they're going to be looking at next year already, because obviously this season's done and dusted. Has been for a while now. They're going to be looking at next year and going, right, this is the team we want to build. This is how we want to move forward. If they're sort of indecisive and they don't know, well, as I said here, they're going to be replacing Pierre Gasly. But if they're looking elsewhere at his teammate, they've not got a strategy in place for me, and that's all I'm reading off that. That I am worried for them next year. Whether Hartley comes in, whether he doesn't, I am still going to be worried for Toro Rosso and how they go from here.
It's funny because Tara Rosso kind of remind me of Crew Alexandra, which is a local team in Cheshire for me, and they just rely on their academy players all the time, and they all ship off if they do so well, and then, well, I guess that's just what Tara Rosso are. They are, of course, a sister team of Red Bull.
Feeder team, aren't they?
Yes, they certainly are, but I mean, for Brendon Hartley, he'll take the contract right now at Toro Rosso because it would be his first ever proper season. But we'll see how he does this weekend. Hopefully his enthusiasm doesn't take over him throughout the race because he knows it's going to be an exciting time, but he's got to bring the car home, as they always say on the team radio, and that will be his highest priority for the weekend, just to finish a race, I'm sure. And a top 10, maybe so, we'll find out. Anyway, let's move on to another driver because there's another transfer that's happened throughout the season. And this is Carlos Sainz. Yes, he was supposed to be in the Renault yellow and black uniform in Australia next year, but instead he ordered it from Amazon Prime, and it came the day after. It came so early, months before he got it in the post back in Spain, and he's actually, funny enough, ended up with a contract with it to say that he can start in America. And there's a Julian Palmer at a bar somewhere watching the next race, I'm sure, somewhere in England, crying in his beer, thinking that could have been me driving at the US Grand Prix, but no, I couldn't even finish a whole season, god damn it. But anyway, moving on from Palmer, you're gone now, you don't exist. And
was going to be one of the grid girls we were saying before we came onto the podcast. He's now going to be on the grid just chilling, undercover sort of thing.
Can you imagine Julian Palmer as a grid girl? That'd be so scary.
It's not something I want to imagine, but it is possible.
He's gonna be the guy that passes the caps to the winners.
He's gonna be doing. We were saying he's gonna be doing the grid walk with Martin Brundle.
How does it feel being an F1 driver?
Oh wow! Anyway, this is what Carlos Sainz had to say in his first press conference wearing the Renault uniform.
Well, I think first of all, 2018 cars will be an evolution of this year, no? So every input I can have regarding this year's car, every feeling I can get from every single area of the car, I'm sure it will help me for next year. On top of that, it's always better to meet engineers, PR people, team bosses, or start working along together with all of them 4 races earlier. That gives us a bit of an advantage, I think, for 2018 rather than going straight into winter testing in 2018.
I don't know about you, Jet, but I feel Carlos Sainz could have a bright future in F1. I don't know why, but he's from the same country as Alonso, so I feel he can do very well with the car he has, no matter what car. And let's not forget what he did in Singapore this year, getting 4th for Toro Rosso, which is an amazing result in a car like that, where they're supposed to be behind Red Bull cars, which is a fantastic achievement in itself. But what do you think for Sainz next year? Renault really look like they've got one of the strongest teams out there.
Yeah, it's certainly a great lineup to look at, especially for next season, like you said. He has proved his worth since he's been at Toro Rosso. I think, like you said, it's the sister team to Red Bull, so they're never really expected to get any higher. But he has pushed them. He has pushed everybody on the grid. He's battled with Alonso this year, which obviously in a McLaren is going to be obvious anyway. But both of them have been fair in their fighting, and I think a lot of drivers probably respect Sainz on the grid. When you compare him to like the Magnussen and that people don't, I think Sainz has got a great respect in that grid, and I think, like you said, joining that team with Nico Hülkenberg, that is a very strong lineup for a mid-table team. I mean, that's probably 2 of the best drivers on the grid that Renault could pick. So I think, obviously, being a British fan, sad for Julian Palmer. You won't agree, but it's sad going halfway out through the season. It's not great, if I'm honest. He obviously wanted to finish the season, but things change in F1 really quickly, and if Sainz gets the opportunity to join the team, I don't think the team are going to say no. So, looking to next season, Nico Hülkenberg and Carlos Sainz is a really great lineup for Renault. Dan, your thoughts?
I echo what Jack says. I think it is disappointing to see a British driver go out, but at the end of the day, he's not exactly, set the world alight, has he? He's not exactly been the fans' favourite. He's not been a great driver, and I can see why he's lost that seat. But I do think Carlos Sainz and Hulkenberg at Renault. I think that is going to be a very good team. Yeah, I do. And I think they could probably push for top 10s if they can get that car going. So that'll be interesting to see. But I do echo Jack's thoughts. It is disappointing to see Palmer not on the grid. But at the same time, I don't think he's set the world of F1 alight.
While we're talking about estate agents and Formula One drivers, let's quickly mention what's happened this week, where Kubica had his second day of testing, and so did Paul di Resta the day after. I think it was on Wednesday for Williams, but it sounds like Kubica had a good one, and it looks like di Resta might have done as well. But Dan, you found a rumour earlier about Paul di Resta's future.
Yeah, Paul di Resta is supposedly being looked at next year for Williams. So that will be very, very interesting, of course, here on Let's Talk Sport on the Pole Position podcast. He's not exactly a favourite, is he, lads?
No, not from our Twitter poll anyway. I think he actually got more than Massa, which was with 5%, while Massa had 3%. But there was a certain member in this group right now who voted for di Resta just for a bit of fun, and he's laughing and giggling, and that's Jack Price. But do you guys... I mean, I know we've all been saying this. Well, I know Jack and Harry have said it, where it's Kubica being at Williams is just a publicity stunt, clickbait and all that's a thing on the internet, sadly now. Fake news, as Donald Trump likes to say. But, you know, Jack, do you really want Kubica in F1 again?
I think that everybody wants to see Kubica in F1. It's whether he can actually do a full season. And I think that's what a lot of people are still worried about, whether or not he could do the whole calendar. My honest opinion is that if they're not going to pick Massa, and I don't think that they are, because if they were, they would have announced it by now, surely. So I think Massa...
You don't think it'll be Massa? You think it'll be going?
Well, I think it's a surprise, because if they were going to announce Massa, and Massa said he's wanted to stay. He's made that clear for a couple of races now. You think if Massa was saying that and Williams were agreeing, you think they would have signed the contract by now. So I'll be a little surprised if Massa does stay. I'd like Massa to stay because I still think he's a good driver on the grid, and he's come back this year in quite a poor car, really. Williams been this year. And tried to do performances. But if I think anyone's going to be in that car, if it's not going to be Massa, I don't think it's going to be Kubica. I think it's a strong chance that Paul di Resta is going to be in that car this next season. So I think it might line up with Stroll and di Resta, and that might not please some avid F1 fans, but to be honest, I don't think Williams are going to be at the top of the grid next season anyway, because we talked about them 4 teams earlier. I think Williams, if they perform like they have this season, they're going to be below all 4 of them.
If you put Paul di Resta in, you're already admitting defeat.
That's the best line I've heard of the whole thing, Dan. That's brilliant. There we go. That's the headline of our podcast right there. Maybe we shouldn't send that to William, should we really? But no, sadly, we'll find out soon. I really do want this announcement to come out. Jack said before we started the podcast, probably by Abu Dhabi, which is the final race. We should hopefully find out in the next few weeks. But good luck, Kubica. Kubica forever. I've even got a BMW Sauber cap from 2008 that I've got in the cupboard somewhere, and I'll be wearing it. It reminded me of the good old days when he won in Canada. What a race that was in 2008. And his teammate Nick Heidfeld as well, who was just a beautiful man. I just said that. Anyway, let's go on to the Pole Position Podcast Predictions Championship now, before we wrap up. And, if we look at the table after 3 races, Harry Wright is on 34 points. He's at the top. We do call him Mr. F1, so there's no surprise. Dan Middleton is 10 points behind with 24. I'm still on 16. I didn't get any points in Japan, while Jack finally got his first points in Japan with 10. So now he's 6 behind me. Listeners, I'm in trouble. I have Jack, who is 6 behind me. What is going on? But anyway, let's go through their predictions now. I don't think anyone knows who's predicted what of each other apart from myself, because they have to send it to me before the race, which finally got Harry to remember. In his words, don't ever put a shitty Sauber in the podium for me again. Anyway, let's start off with Dan. Do you remember yours?
I'm going to let you do the honours as always, Jamie.
Okay. That means he's not confident. Hamilton first, fair enough. He's won the 4 of the last 5 Grand Prix in America. Vettel's second. Now, that could be a good battle between the two. And Verstappen third. And now the form Verstappen's on, that could be a very good race for him as well. Jack Price, same question.
I believe I had Hamilton. It was late at night last night, so Hamilton, Ricciardo, and Bottas. I think I went with.
Correct, Jack. Correct.
If only that's correct on the weekend, I'll be even happier.
So another Hamilton win from Jack. Harry Wright. He has. Who do you think he's gone for to win?
Vettel.
Hamilton.
Hamilton, yep, you're right, Dan. It's another Hamilton favoured. Vettel second and Ricciardo third. And then let's come with me. Let's go to me. I have gone for Hamilton win. So it's 4 out of 4 for Hamilton. It's a clean sweep. The first time in our predictions that we've all gone for the same driver to win. Vettel second and Bottas third. So, let's see how it goes. Anyway, at the moment, Harry's leading. Jack's bottom and me and Dan are in the middle. Well, Dan's second and I'm third. So at the moment, Jack is just missing out on the podium if it stays like this come the end of the season. Anyway, before we go, we do have, of course, a few videos coming up on the Let's Talk Sport YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe to stay tuned for that, because coming up we have, of course, as promised, a Karen Chandok interview. Where, of course, I asked him a few questions, and we, of course, read out a few fans' questions. And for any of you fans out there that was able to submit a question, you're in luck. See what he said. So that's coming up over the weekend. And then, of course, myself and Jack Price went to Manchester in Deansgate at Waterstones to meet Jenson Button, as he, of course, did a book signing on his new one, Life to the Limit. And certainly was a good day out. We've got a bit of a recording from that. It's all audio, not video, but it will be going up on our YouTube channel on Let's Talk Sport. So thanks to Jack Price and Dan Middleton for their contributions to the build-up. And of course, make sure you share, subscribe, and like the YouTube channel. And we will see you very well soon.